The Great Pyramid should not still be standing. Ancient builders created monuments that defy our understanding of time itself. By the end of this, you will know the hidden rules of structural mechanics that allowed these stone giants to conquer millennia. We will uncover why Roman concrete grows stronger with age and how temples dance with earthquakes without falling. What forgotten truth about our own history is silently waiting beneath these stones? High in the Andean mist, the stone walls of Machu Picchu cling to the mountain. These structures are a profound mystery. They're perfectly fitted blocks holding fast through hundreds of years of violent earthquakes that would level modern cities. This is the central puzzle of ancient construction. How did buildings made with what we consider primitive tools achieve a longevity that so many of our own structures struggle to match? The answer lies not in one single secret, but in a combination of foundational principles that these builders understood on an intuitive level. It begins with the materials themselves. Ancient engineers did not simply use the nearest rock. They selected stones with specific properties, often choosing dense, crystalline granite for its immense compressive strength. They understood that a building's foundation must be as unyielding as the earth it sits upon. Next, we see geometric precision. The iconic interlocking blocks of Inca masonry are not just for show. That intricate puzzle piece fitting creates a distributed load path. Instead of the weight of the entire structure bearing down on a few weak points, the force is shared across countless stone joints, moving through the wall like a crowd passing a heavy object hand to hand. This design is inherently resilient. Modern structural engineers and archaeologists studying these sites describe the buildings not as static piles of rock, but as dynamic machines in constant dialogue with their environment. The stones at Machu Picchu, for instance, are designed to dance. During an earthquake, the precisely cut blocks will sway and shift minutely, the energy of the seismic waves dissipating as friction between the stones. When the shaking stops, gravity simply settles them back into place. It is a system of brilliant simplicity and effectiveness. This enduring nature challenges our most basic assumption, the idea that technology moves in a straight line from primitive to advanced. We build with steel and concrete, materials we can mass produce and control absolutely, yet our creations often have a planned lifespan. They fight against natural forces. These ancient builders, however, worked in harmony with those same forces. They asked not how to resist the earthquake, but how to move with it. They asked not just how to place a stone, but which stone belonged in that exact spot. What foundational wisdom about working with the world instead of against it have we forgotten along the way? That seamless fit between stones is the signature of a lost art. It is called dry stone masonry, and it represents the first great secret of ancient structural mechanics. At sites like the fortress of Sacsayhuaman in Peru, you see walls composed of massive, irregular blocks. They look like a giant's jigsaw puzzle, each piece uniquely shaped to lock perfectly with its neighbors. The goal was not to use mortar as a glue, but to achieve a contact so intimate that the entire wall behaved as a single, interlocked unit. This method transformed a pile of individual rocks into a cohesive, living structure. The process was one of profound patience and understanding. Masons were not simply stacking bricks. They were engaging in a three-dimensional conversation with the stone. They would carefully study a raw block, assessing its grain and internal strength. Then, through a meticulous process of precise hammering and grinding, they would shape it, not into a standard rectangle, but into a complex polygonal form. The fitting was a ritual of trial and error, a block would be placed, its contours marked on the neighboring stones, then lifted away for further refinement. This would repeat until the fit was so exact that the join all but disappeared. The result was a wall with countless interlocking joints. This intricate fitting created a genius system of load distribution. In a conventional wall with uniform blocks, the weight of the structure presses down through the vertical mortar lines, creating concentrated lines of stress. But in a polygonal dry stone wall, the weight is forced to travel along a sprawling, zigzagging path. The load spreads out horizontally as well as vertically, shared across the entire face of the wall. Think of it like a net. A force applied to one part of the net is dissipated and carried by all the interconnected strands, preventing any single point from bearing the full burden. This design granted the structure a remarkable ability to breathe and move. When the ground shakes during an earthquake, a rigid, mortared wall will try to resist the motion, often cracking or crumbling under the strain. A dry stone wall, however, is flexible. The stones are permitted to shift and sway minutely against one another. The energy of the earthquake is converted into friction and sound, dissipated through the countless tiny movements between the blocks. Then, when the shaking ceases, gravity guides each stone back into its custom-fitted seat. The wall settles, but it does not collapse. This principle was not unique to the Incas. Far across the world, the Mycenaean Greeks built their citadels with what we call cyclopean walls, using enormous, rough-hewn limestone blocks fitted together without mortar. These massive walls have also withstood millennia of earthquakes and wars. The same underlying logic connects these ancient cultures, a shared insight that the strongest structure is not the most rigid one, but the one that can dance with the forces that try to break it. They achieved a perfect harmony between their material and their method, using the inherent strength and nature of stone itself as their greatest tool. This ancient art raises a compelling question. In our pursuit of absolute control over our building materials, have we sacrificed the resilient flexibility that truly endures? That intimate, interlocking fit of stone is only the beginning. The second secret lies in a silent language of line and ratio, a hidden geometry that guided the hands of ancient architects. Look at the Parthenon standing proud on the Athenian Acropolis. At first glance, it appears as a temple of perfect straight lines and right angles, but this is a masterful illusion. Every single one of its marble columns bulges slightly in the middle, a subtle swelling known as intosses. This curve is no accident. It corrects the optical illusion that would make perfectly straight columns appear to bend inward under the weight of the roof. Furthermore, the spacing of the columns is not uniform. It is meticulously calculated so that from a distance, the entire structure appears in perfect, harmonious balance to the human eye. This obsessive pursuit of visual perfection was rooted in something far deeper than aesthetics. It was an application of sacred proportions, most famously the golden ratio. This ratio, approximately 1.618 to 1, appears throughout nature, from the spiral of a nautilus shell to the arrangement of seeds in a sunflower. The ancient Greeks saw this as a divine proportion, a mathematical key to beauty and stability in the universe. They encoded it directly into their architecture. The front face of the Parthenon fits almost perfectly into a golden rectangle. This specific proportion creates a sense of order that is deeply pleasing to us, almost on an instinctual level. But this geometry was far more than just spiritual decoration. It was a fundamental tool of structural mechanics. In ancient Egypt, the pyramids at Giza are a testament to the power of pi and other precise ratios. The perimeter of the Great Pyramid divided by its height gives a value remarkably close to 2 times pi. This integration of a fundamental mathematical constant into the dimensions is not a coincidence. It creates a specific, stable angle for the pyramid's faces, an angle that efficiently channels the immense weight of the stone down into the bedrock below. The structure becomes a machine for managing gravity itself. This principle echoes through the ages, reaching its zenith in the Gothic cathedrals of medieval Europe. Their soaring vaults and flying buttresses are a visible expression of hidden geometric rules. Master masons used compasses and straightedges to design these stone skeletons based on simple geometric shapes like the square and the circle. These forms dictated how the crushing weight of the roof and walls would be transferred along specific, optimized paths. The force is gathered from the vast ceiling and funneled down through the ribs of the vault, then pushed outwards into the flying buttresses, which gracefully channel it down into the ground. The entire building is a diagram of its own structural logic, written in stone and based on sacred mathematics. For these builders, the act of construction was both a science and a spiritual practice. By aligning a temple with the rising sun on a solstice, or by ensuring its proportions reflected the golden ratio, they were weaving cosmic order into the very fabric of their world. They believed a building that mirrored the harmony of the heavens would itself be harmonious, stable, and enduring. The stability was a direct result of the order. This raises a profound question about our own modern landscapes. In our drive for efficiency and speed, have we lost the language of sacred geometry, that deep-seated understanding that true strength is found in balance and proportion, not just in the raw strength of our materials? While geometry provided the invisible bones of ancient structures, a third secret gave them an almost supernatural resilience, locked within the very substance of the stone itself. The most breathtaking example is the dome of the Roman Pantheon. This vast, unsupported concrete ceiling has loomed over Rome for nearly 2,000 years, its integrity outlasting the empire that built it. Its survival is not a mystery of luck but of forgotten science. The Romans were not merely builders, they were alchemists of the earth, transforming humble local materials into an engineered composite of phenomenal durability. Their secret ingredient was a specific type of volcanic ash known as pozzolana. When this ash was mixed with lime and seawater, it triggered a slow-burning chemical reaction that is the complete opposite of how modern concrete behaves. Our concrete hardens and then gradually weakens over decades, succumbing to cracks and erosion. Roman concrete, however, grows stronger with age. The pozzolana reaction creates crystals that continue to form and interlock for centuries, effectively self-healing microscopic cracks as they appear. Imagine a material that actively repairs its own wear and tear decade after decade for millennia. This was the reality of Roman engineering. We see this principle in action not just in majestic temples, but in the workhorses of their civilization. Submerged harbor walls, like those at Caesarea Maritima, have spent 2,000 years being pounded by salt water, a substance that rapidly degrades modern Portland cement. Yet these ancient breakwaters stand stronger than ever, their surfaces often becoming smoother and more resilient over time. The same chemistry was at work in the aqueducts that stretched for miles, their waterproof linings ensuring a constant flow of fresh water. They achieved this not with complex machinery or digital simulations, but with a profound, almost intuitive understanding of geochemistry. They learned to read the land, identifying the specific volcanic deposits that would yield this reactive ash. Their recipe was a form of place-based genius, using the unique properties of their local environment to create a material that we are only now beginning to fully comprehend with advanced electron microscopes. Modern scientists studying samples from ancient Roman piers have identified rare mineral formations that act as self-sealing agents. This is a property that today's material scientists are desperately trying to replicate in labs, hoping to create concretes that can extend the lifespan of our own critical infrastructure. The ancient builders achieved a kind of symbiotic relationship with their materials. They did not seek to dominate stone and mortar, but to collaborate with their inherent chemical potential. This raises a humbling thought. In an age of synthetic composites and mass production, have we overlooked the profound, long-lasting solutions that can be found in the natural chemistry of the Earth itself? The Pantheon's concrete is a testament to material science, but what happens when the ground itself begins to move? For that, we must travel to Japan, to the Horyuji Temple, the world's oldest wooden building. This pagoda has weathered over 14 centuries of violent tremors, not by standing rigid and defiant, but by learning to sway. Its survival hinges on a fourth secret, an ancient form of seismic intelligence that allowed structures to dissipate destructive energy through motion. This is the principle of base isolation, a concept we think of as modern, but one that ancient builders understood intuitively. The central pillar of the Horyuji Pagoda, for instance, is not anchored firmly to its foundation. Instead, it acts like a massive, suspended pendulum. When an earthquake strikes, the heavy roof and upper floors begin to sway independently of the lower structure. This rocking motion absorbs and cancels out the seismic energy, preventing it from building up and shattering the building. The entire pagoda dances with the quake, moving just enough to stay intact. This wisdom was not confined to Japan. In many ancient cultures, we find evidence of this deliberate flexibility. The Incas, masters of stone, sometimes placed their massive walls on layers of gravel or sand. During a tremor, these granular layers would shift and roll, allowing the foundation to slide minutely and absorb the shock, a primitive but effective form of base isolation that prevented the waves from traveling upwards into the structure itself. Similarly, traditional timber frames across the world, from Chinese temples to Ottoman houses, used complex wooden joinery. These interlocking brackets and joints were not nailed or glued rigidly. They were designed to flex, to twist and turn within a limited range, acting as a network of natural shock absorbers. The building would groan and creak as it moved, a chorus of wood straining against force, and then settle back into place when the shaking stopped. These builders were engaging in a profound dialogue with the forces of nature. They observed that a rigid tree in a storm will snap, while a flexible sapling will bend and survive. They applied this same logic to their architecture. They did not ask, how can we make our building strong enough to resist the earthquake? They asked, how can we allow it to move with the earthquake and remain standing? This represents a fundamental shift in perspective from defiance to harmony. Modern engineering is only now fully embracing these principles with sophisticated rubber and lead bearings installed beneath skyscrapers. Yet these ancient case studies reveal a timeless truth. The most resilient structure is not an immovable fortress, but one that possesses a controlled grace, an ability to yield just enough to avoid breaking. It makes you wonder, as we design ever taller and more complex buildings, are we remembering to build in this ancient capacity to dance? The resilience of a structure that can sway with an earthquake reveals a deep understanding of physical forces. But what if some ancient builders were manipulating forces we cannot even see? Deep beneath the island of Malta lies a labyrinth known as the Hypogeum of Halsaflieni, a subterranean temple carved from solid limestone. Within its oracle chamber, a single spoken word is transformed. It does not merely echo, it resonates, amplifying into a deep, pervasive hum that seems to vibrate through your very bones. This is not an architectural accident. It is the fifth secret, the intentional use of acoustic engineering as a fundamental component of structural design. Ancient architects were not just building for the eye, but for the ear. They shaped stone to harness specific resonant frequencies, creating auditory environments with profound effects. The unique shape of the oracle chamber, with its carved niches and curved walls, acts as a perfect sound resonator for the frequency of 110 Hz. This specific frequency is known to modern researchers to alter brainwave patterns, potentially inducing states of deep relaxation, heightened focus, or even trance. In such a space, sound becomes a technology. It becomes a tool for ceremony, for healing, or for communication with the divine. This acoustic mastery echoes across the world and through the ages. At Newgrange in Ireland, a massive 5,000-year-old passage tomb, the interior chamber creates startling auditory effects. A ritual drumbeat made inside would not just be heard, it would be felt as a physical pressure, a visceral experience that could unite a community in a shared, powerful vibration. Far across the Atlantic, the step pyramid of Chichen Itza offers another brilliant example. A hand clap at the base of the grand staircase is reflected back not as a simple echo, but as a chirping sound that eerily mimics the call of the sacred Quetzal bird. This phenomenon is created by the precise spacing and angle of the stone steps, which break the sound wave into a rapid series of reflections. The builders of these sites demonstrated a sophisticated awareness of physics. They understood how sound waves would behave when interacting with their carefully crafted geometries. They selected their materials with acoustic properties in mind. The dense granite of a temple wall or the smooth limestone of a burial chamber were not just structurally sound, they were acoustically alive. This integration of the auditory environment suggests a holistic view of architecture, where a building's purpose was achieved through a symphony of sensory experiences. The structure was not just a container for ritual, it was an active participant. The very stones were instruments tuned to frequencies that could influence human consciousness and connect people to something larger than themselves. In our modern world, we often design spaces to be acoustically dead, to minimize noise and distraction, but these ancient sites challenge that approach. They suggest that the power of a place is not just in its ability to stand against time, but in its capacity to speak, to sing, and to transform those who enter. What other invisible dimensions of their architectural genius are we only just beginning to hear? Sound is a force that can shape stone and consciousness, but water is an element that can carve canyons and topple empires. To build for the ages, ancient engineers had to master its flow, and their sixth secret transformed water from a destructive threat into a structural ally. In the arid landscapes of India, the stepwell of Chand Bayori descends 13 stories into the earth. This is not merely a source of water, it is a breathtaking inverted palace, a geometric masterpiece of 3,500 steps cascading down to a deep, cool reservoir. Its design is a profound response to a harsh reality. The water table here fluctuates dramatically between monsoons and droughts. By digging deep and structuring the walls with immense, interlocking steps, the builders created a system that could access water at its lowest levels while providing staggering structural stability against the Earth's pressure. The weight of the soil and the hydrostatic force of the water itself are countered by the stepped pyramidal form, a geometry that resists collapse from every direction. This was hydraulic engineering as a foundational principle, not an afterthought. The Romans elevated this mastery to a civilization scale. Their aqueducts are legendary, but the genius is in the subtle details. They understood that water does not naturally flow uphill, so they used gravity as their engine. Through meticulous surveying, they achieved near-perfect gradients, sometimes as slight as 1 foot of drop for every 200 feet of length, allowing water to traverse dozens of miles from mountain springs to city centers. When they encountered a deep valley, they did not simply build a high bridge, they often employed inverted siphons. These systems used lead pipes to carry water down one side of the valley, and harnessing the principle that water seeks its own level up the other side. The immense pressure at the bottom of the siphon was contained through robust stone supports and the strength of the sealed pipes themselves. This was an application of fluid mechanics that rivals modern engineering. Within their cities, this mastery continued. Elaborate underground cisterns, like the vast basilica cistern in Constantinople, supported the weight of entire forums above them. Their vaulted brick ceilings were engineered to withstand the colossal outward pressure of the stored water, while complex systems of channels and settling tanks ensured a clean supply. This careful management of water pressure and purity was fundamental to urban health and structural survival. It prevented the erosion that could undermine foundations and the stagnation that could breed disease. From the stepwells of India to the aqueducts of Rome, these ancient builders viewed water as an integral part of their structural calculus. They did not try to block it or ignore it, they invited it in, channeling its power and planning for its presence. Their buildings were designed to work in concert with the hydrological cycle, to breathe with the rains and store against the droughts. In our modern world of buried pipes and hidden infrastructure, have we lost this sacred respect for water, this understanding that to build something that truly lasts, you must first make peace with the flow of the earth itself? The stones themselves seem to hold a memory of the sky. At dawn on the summer solstice, the first rays of the sun slice through the English mist, striking the heel stone and casting a long, precise shadow into the heart of Stonehenge. This event is not a fortunate coincidence. It is the seventh secret, the profound integration of celestial mechanics into the very bones of ancient structures. These builders were not just constructing monuments, they were building cosmic clocks and terrestrial maps of the heavens, aligning their work with the sun, the moon, and the stars. This celestial orientation served a dual purpose, blending the practical with the spiritual, and in doing so, often enhancing the structure's very stability. For agrarian societies, this was a matter of survival. A temple aligned to the solstices became a giant agricultural calendar. The precise day when the sun illuminated the inner sanctum marked the time to plant or to harvest, turning the movement of the cosmos into a direct instruction for the community. This required an astonishingly precise and long-term understanding of astronomy, observing cycles that repeat only over generations, but the influence went far beyond marking seasons. Consider the Great Pyramid of Giza. Its sides are aligned with the 4 cardinal directions with an error of less than 1/15 of a degree. This near-perfect orientation is a staggering feat of engineering, but it also has a structural benefit. By squaring the massive base so precisely with the Earth's rotation, the builders created a foundation of exceptional balance, distributing the pyramid's immense weight evenly and symmetrically into the bedrock. It was a structure in harmony with the planet's own axis. This principle of harnessing celestial paths for structural advantage is brilliantly displayed at the Sun Temple of Konark in India. Shaped as a colossal chariot for the sun god, the entire temple was designed around the path of the sun. Its main tower, now collapsed, was positioned so that the first rays of dawn would strike the central deity within. The placement of subsidiary structures and the intricate carvings were orchestrated to create specific patterns of light and shadow throughout the day and across the year. This careful consideration of the solar path also influenced the building's relationship with its environment. potentially managing solar heat gain and prevailing winds to preserve the integrity of the stonework. By building in sync with these powerful, predictable cycles, ancient architects ensured their creations were partners with the universe, not adversaries. They understood that a building positioned to welcome the sun would face less thermal stress. A temple oriented to channel the cool north wind would naturally resist dampness and decay. This was a holistic form of engineering where astronomy, meteorology, and structural mechanics were inseparable. The stability of the building was seen as a direct result of its cosmic harmony. In our modern cities, we often build without any reference to the sun's journey or the stars' positions. Our structures fight their environment, requiring massive energy for heating and cooling. But these ancient sites whisper a different truth, that the most enduring strength comes from aligning ourselves with the grand, eternal rhythms of the world we inhabit. What does it mean for a building to truly know its place in the cosmos? A single Egyptian obelisk weighs more than a fleet of modern trucks. To move such a monolith, let alone lift it upright, seems like a task from mythology. Yet these stone needles were raised with breathtaking accuracy, and their secret lies in a masterful application of the eighth principle, the art of counterweights and balanced forces. Ancient engineers did not fight against the immense weight of their materials. They used that weight against itself, creating systems of equilibrium that turned impossible tasks into manageable ones. To transport a colossal stone block, they would often employ a system of levers and a cleverly designed sledge. Teams of workers would lift one end of the sledge just enough to slide a wooden roller underneath. As the sledge was pulled forward, the roller would emerge from the back, be carried to the front, and the process would repeat. This continuous cycle created a kind of moving road, drastically reducing friction. But the true genius emerged in the lifting. To raise an obelisk, evidence suggests builders constructed an enormous earthen ramp with a pit at its base. The stone was carefully maneuvered over the pit, and then that pit was slowly filled with sand. As the sand poured in, it acted as a massive, granular counterweight, gradually pulling the base of the obelisk downward and pivoting the tip upward until it stood vertical. It was a slow, controlled dance with gravity, using a mountain of sand to balance a mountain of stone. This understanding of equilibrium was then locked into the structures themselves. Look at the corbelled arches in ancient Mycenaean tombs or the grand galleries of medieval castles. These are not true arches with a central keystone. Instead, they are built by layering stones, each one cantilevered slightly further inward than the one below it. The weight of each new stone counteracts the thrust of the one before it, creating a stable, balanced ceiling where every block is held in place by the mutual pressure of its neighbors. It is a physical manifestation of tension and counter-tension, a frozen moment of perfect balance that can last for millennia. Even the very placement of massive stones reveals this principle. At megalithic sites across Europe, the largest standing stones, the megaliths, were often set deep into the earth. This was not just about stability, it was about creating a pivot point. The portion below ground acted as a counterweight to the section above, allowing the tall stone to withstand wind and weather without toppling. The structure became a balanced system, its own foundation providing the opposing force needed to remain upright. These builders thought in terms of active forces, not passive piles. They saw a structure not as a static object, but as a collection of competing energies that needed to be carefully balanced. They used weight to lift weight. They used thrust to cancel out thrust. In our world of cranes and steel beams, we overpower the forces of nature. But these ancient artisans invited those forces in, asking them to dance in a perfectly choreographed equilibrium. What does it mean to build not with brute force, but with a profound respect for the delicate balance that holds the world together? The desert sun can bake stone until it is too hot to touch, yet inside an ancient Persian courtyard, the air remains cool and still. This comfortable environment was not created by chance, but by design. It reveals the ninth secret of ancient structural mechanics, a mastery of passive climate control that turned buildings into natural partners with their environment. Long before the hum of air conditioning, civilizations from the Middle East to the American Southwest engineered their structures to breathe, using nothing more than the immutable laws of thermodynamics. They built with the climate, not against it, creating interiors that stayed habitable through the fiercest summers and coldest winters. The iconic Persian wind catcher, or bajir, is a perfect example of this genius. This towering structure acted like a natural air pump, capturing cool, fast-moving breezes from high above the ground and funneling them down into the living spaces below. Often, these wind catchers were positioned directly over an underground stream or a qanat, an ancient system of tunnels that brought water from distant aquifers. As the dry desert air descended through the tower and passed over this cool water, it was chilled and humidified, providing a steady, refreshing breeze without a single watt of electricity. This was a self-regulating system, a convective loop powered entirely by the sun's own heating of the atmosphere. The architecture itself became a thermal machine. Thick, massive walls made of mud brick or stone served as thermal batteries. During the scorching day, these walls would slowly absorb heat, preventing it from penetrating the interior. Then, throughout the cool night, they would gradually release that stored heat back into the atmosphere. The interior temperature remained remarkably stable, buffered from the extreme swings outside. This principle of thermal mass was combined with strategic ventilation. Narrow, shaded windows minimized direct solar gain, while cleverly placed openings at different heights encouraged a stack effect, where hot air would naturally rise and escape, pulling cooler air in from below to replace it. We see this same deep understanding of place-based design in the cliff dwellings of the American Southwest, like those at Mesa Verde. Built into deep, south-facing alcoves, these structures were perfectly positioned for solar gain in the winter, when the sun hung low in the sky and warmed the stone walls. In the summer, when the sun was high overhead, the massive rock overhang provided complete shade, keeping the dwellings cool. The builders used the cliff itself as a giant thermal regulator. This bioclimatic approach was not just about comfort, it was a critical strategy for preservation. A building that maintains a stable, moderate temperature and humidity level is a building whose materials are not subjected to the destructive stress of constant expansion and contraction. Wood does not warp as quickly, mortar does not crumble, and stone is spared from the slow degradation of freeze-thaw cycles. These ancient builders possessed an intimate, almost intuitive knowledge of their local environment. They knew the path of the sun in every season, the direction of the prevailing winds, and the thermal properties of the earth beneath their feet. Their architecture was a dialogue with these elements, a way of harnessing natural forces to create a sustainable, enduring habitat. In our modern quest to control our environment with powered systems, have we forgotten how to listen to the whispers of the wind and the wisdom of the sun? A pyramid does not just stand against the sky, it speaks to it. This final, profound secret moves beyond physics and into the human spirit, revealing how cultural beliefs were woven directly into the bones of ancient buildings. The ziggurats of Mesopotamia rose from the flat plains like colossal stairways, their tiered levels representing a cosmological hierarchy, a literal ladder from the earthly realm to the divine. This was not mere decoration. The very form of the structure, its receding layers, created an immensely stable base, distributing its weight broadly and efficiently. The symbolic ascent to the gods was physically embodied in a sound, resilient, and earthquake-resistant design. The myth gave the engineering its shape, and the engineering gave the myth its enduring presence. The same principle is etched into the Great Pyramid of Giza. Its smooth, sloping sides were not only a marvel of geometric precision, but they were also believed to represent a solidified ray of the sun, a ramp for the pharaoh's soul to climb to the heavens. Simultaneously, its form echoed the primordial mound of creation from Egyptian mythology, the first land to emerge from the waters of chaos. This powerful dual metaphor was physically expressed in a structure that is incredibly stable, its shape naturally shedding wind and efficiently channeling its colossal weight downward. The symbol and the structural logic were one and the same. This fusion provided a powerful, dual-purpose strength. For the community, a building rich with symbolic meaning was a building worth maintaining, protecting, and passing down through generations. Its cultural significance ensured its physical preservation, but perhaps more subtly, these metaphors acted as a durable vessel for engineering knowledge itself. In a world without textbooks or blueprints, how do you communicate complex principles of load distribution and stable angles? You encode them in a story. You say, build it like the sun's rays or shape it like the sacred mountain. The myth becomes a mnemonic device, ensuring that the vital, hard-won knowledge of stable construction is remembered and correctly applied across centuries. The Gothic cathedral, with its soaring vaults reaching for the heavens, is not just a church, it is a stone prayer. Its form inspires awe and directs the gaze upward, but that same verticality is made possible by the hidden strength of the flying buttress, a physical expression of faith supporting faith. The entire structure becomes a metaphor for divine grace counterbalancing human aspiration, and that metaphor is also its fundamental structural mechanic. These ancient builders understood that a structure is most resilient when it is deeply rooted in the worldview of its people. The stones were not just stacked, they were storied. The walls did not just enclose space, they encoded a culture's deepest beliefs about the universe and humanity's place within it. When a building means something, it is cared for. When its form tells a story, the principles of its construction are never forgotten. In our age of pure functionalism, have we stripped our buildings of this symbolic soul, and in doing so, have we built things that are easier to discard? A single stone is inert, but 1,000 stones moved in unison become a civilization. The 11th secret of ancient structural mechanics lies not in the stone itself, but in the human spirit, in the breathtaking social and labor organization that transformed vision into reality. Consider the Great Wall of China, a serpent of stone and earth winding across impossible terrain. This was not the work of a single dynasty, but a project spanning generations, demanding the coordinated effort of countless thousands. The true marvel is how these societies mobilized, housed, and managed such vast workforces, developing logistical systems that rival our modern project management. They understood that to build for the ages, you first had to build a society of builders. This required a meticulous division of labor. There were not just anonymous workers. There were specialized roles, each with its own expertise. Quarrymen understood the grain of the rock, selecting blocks for maximum strength. Surveyors used simple but effective tools like the groma and chorobates to lay out perfect alignments over miles of uneven ground. Master masons directed the precise shaping and placement of stones, while engineers designed the ramps, levers, and scaffolding that made the impossible possible. This human machinery was supported by its own infrastructure. At the pyramid complex of Giza, archaeologists have uncovered the remains of a dedicated workers' city, complete with bakeries, breweries, and medical facilities capable of supporting a small, permanent town of skilled laborers. This was not slave labor under the lash, but a highly organized, stratified society where skilled work was valued and sustained. The Roman road network, which once connected an empire from Scotland to Syria, stands as another testament to this organizational genius. Legions of soldiers acting as engineers were deployed with standardized manuals. They worked in coordinated units, with some teams clearing the path, others laying the foundation of packed rubble, and specialist pavers finishing the surface with interlocking stones. This system allowed for simultaneous construction across vast distances, creating a coherent infrastructure project on a continental scale. The ability to organize human effort with such precision was as crucial as any technical innovation in stone fitting or concrete chemistry. It was a form of social engineering where the structure of the society itself became the most important tool of construction. The pyramids, the Great Wall, the Roman aqueducts, they are all monuments to this human capacity for collective action, for subsuming individual effort into a grand, multi-generational goal. This raises a humbling question for our own era of fragmented projects and short-term goals. Do we still possess the social fabric, the shared vision, necessary to coordinate human endeavor on such a timeless and majestic scale? The stones of Sacsayhuaman are cut so precisely that a razor blade cannot slip between them, yet we have never found the tools that made such a cut. This is the 12th secret, a haunting void in the archaeological record that points not to a lack of skill, but to the existence of lost tools and techniques, methods so effective they have vanished without a trace. How do you carve granite as if it were soft wood? One compelling hypothesis involves the use of simple copper saws and drills. On its own, copper is too soft to scratch granite. But when used with a generous flow of abrasive sand, something remarkable happens. The copper acts as a carrier, pressing hard quartz crystals into the stone. The sand does the actual cutting, slowly grinding through the rock with relentless, patient friction. It is a method that requires immense skill and time, but it leaves behind a distinctive signature, a cut with a slight, smooth curvature that matches exactly what we see on ancient Egyptian stone coffins. Experiments with reconstructed tools have proven it is possible. A team using a copper tube, a bow drill, and wet sand can indeed bore a clean hole into a granite block. The process is not quick, but it is profoundly effective. It demonstrates that what appears impossible to us with our power tools and diamond-tipped blades was achievable with patience and a deep understanding of material science. This leads to an even more tantalizing idea, the possibility of chemical knowledge that has been entirely lost. Some researchers point to ancient texts from other cultures that speak of plant-based acids or other chemical agents that could soften stone, making it pliable enough to mold or carve with relative ease. While no direct recipe has been found in Egypt or Peru, the concept is not as far-fetched as it seems. We know the Romans used pozzolana to create self-healing concrete, a form of chemical alchemy. Could other civilizations have discovered ways to temporarily alter the crystalline structure of granite? If such a substance existed, it would have been a precious secret, perhaps orally transmitted only to master masons and leaving no physical evidence behind. The absence of these tools in the archaeological record is a silent challenge to our assumptions. We must remember that the most sophisticated knowledge is often held in the hands and minds of artisans, not written on papyrus or carved in stone. A master mason's techniques, the exact angle to hold a drill, the specific type of sand to use for a given rock, these were trade secrets passed from father to son, from master to apprentice over generations. This was a living library of applied physics, and when that lineage was broken, the library burned down without a single scroll catching fire. The true lesson here is not about finding a magic tool, but about re-evaluating the nature of knowledge itself. We tend to equate technological advancement with complexity and durability. But what if the highest form of engineering was actually based on simplicity, on using the friction of sand, the leverage of a wooden pole, and the patient, accumulated wisdom of countless lifetimes? The stones stand as a testament not to what was lost, but to what human ingenuity can achieve when it works in harmony with the fundamental forces of the world. A building can only endure if it learns to live within its landscape. The 13th secret of ancient structural mechanics is this profound adaptability, a design philosophy that saw environmental stress not as an enemy to be conquered, but as a partner to be understood. The cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde are a masterclass in this approach. Tucked deep into south-facing alcoves, these structures were perfectly positioned. The massive rock overhang was more than a roof, it was a sophisticated environmental shield. In the summer, it blocked the high, scorching sun, keeping the dwellings cool. In the winter, when the sun hung low in the sky, its rays could penetrate deep into the alcove, warming the stone walls that would then radiate heat throughout the night. The builders did not invent insulation, they found it, carved directly into the mountain itself. This principle of site-specific adaptation echoes across the globe and through different climates. In the swampy basin of Lake Texcoco, the Aztecs did not try to drain the land to build their capital, Tenochtitlan. Instead, they adapted to the water, creating chinampas or floating gardens. By weaving together reeds and layering them with rich mud from the lake bottom, they formed artificial islands that were both fertile farmland and stable foundations for their city. The very material that would undermine a conventional foundation was harnessed to create a resilient, self-sustaining urban ecosystem. Similarly, stilt villages found throughout Southeast Asia and the Pacific raised their homes above the floodplain. This simple elevation is a direct and elegant response to seasonal rains and tidal surges, allowing water to flow harmlessly underneath while life continues safely above. The structure yields to the element, avoiding a catastrophic fight. The selection of local materials was a critical part of this strategy. Builders chose resources that had already proven their durability against local conditions. In the frequent rains of ancient Cambodia, the builders of Angkor Wat used laterite, a porous, iron-rich stone that hardens upon exposure to air and is highly resistant to water erosion. In the dry, windy deserts of the Middle East, thick walls of mudbrick provided excellent thermal mass, keeping interiors cool by day and warm by night. These were not just conveniently available rocks and soils, they were naturally evolved solutions to specific environmental pressures. The builders were reading the wisdom inherent in the land itself and translating it into architecture. This creates a powerful symbiotic relationship between the built and natural worlds. A structure that is adapted to its environment requires less energy to maintain, suffers less physical stress, and ultimately enjoys a much longer lifespan. It does not constantly battle the forces of wind, water, and sun, but rather incorporates them into its very logic. This is the deepest meaning of sustainable design, long before the term ever existed. It forces us to ask a difficult question about our own modern constructions. In our quest to make every place suitable for any building, have we created fragile structures that must be perpetually defended from the world they stand in, instead of resilient ones that are born from it? Those collapsed lintels and leaning walls were not failures, they were the first and most brutal lessons in a long, unrecorded curriculum. Every fallen roof and cracked foundation taught an ancient engineer something invaluable about the limits of stone, wood, and earth. This is the 14th secret, the profound role of trial, error, and iterative learning in developing structural mechanics. These builders did not have a textbook of physics, but they had something perhaps more powerful, a living laboratory of their own creations, where the consequences of a miscalculation were immediate and absolute. They learned by observing which designs remained standing through a harsh winter or a trembling earth, and which ones did not. This empirical knowledge, gathered over generations, accumulated into a vast, unwritten body of practical wisdom. The master mason knew the safe span for a stone lintel, not because he had calculated the tensile strength of granite, but because he had seen, or been told by his own master, what happened when a span was pushed just a little too far. The most beautiful illustration of this gradual refinement is the evolution of the arch. The earliest versions were simple corbelled arches, where each stone was cantilevered inward, step by step, until the gap at the top could be closed with a single capstone. It was a stable design, but it created immense outward thrust, requiring massively thick walls to contain the force. Then, through centuries of experimentation across different cultures, a better solution emerged: the true arch. This revolutionary form, built with a framework of wedge-shaped stones called voussoirs, channeled the weight downward and outward in a more controlled, efficient manner. The keystone at the crown became the genius component, locking the entire structure into a state of perfect equilibrium, where each stone held its neighbor in place. This was not a sudden invention, but a slow, collective intelligence at work. A builder in Mesopotamia might have improved the corbel design. A Roman engineer later refined the use of the true arch for aqueducts, and a medieval master perfected it for cathedral vaults. Each generation stood on the shoulders of the previous one, building success upon the lessons of past mistakes. This process of iterative learning was a powerful, patient engine of innovation. It asked a simple, relentless question: how can we make this better, stronger, and more lasting than the one that came before? In our modern world of rapid prototyping and digital simulations, we have accelerated this cycle beyond ancient comprehension. But have we preserved the deep, hard-won respect for the laws of physics that comes from watching your own work stand the test of time or fall before it? Beneath the visible landscape, ancient traditions saw an invisible anatomy of power. They believed the earth itself was alive, crisscrossed by channels of energy known in some cultures as ley lines or dragon paths. This is the 15th secret, the integration of geomancy into the very placement of sacred structures. For these builders, a site was not chosen merely for its flat ground or solid bedrock. It was selected because it felt right, because it resonated with a vital force they sought to harness and honor. This was a science of the spirit, a way of aligning human creation with the perceived heartbeat of the planet. In China, this practice was known as Feng Shui, the art of wind and water. Its masters would read the contours of the land like a map of flowing energy, identifying auspicious locations shielded from harsh winds and nourished by gentle watercourses. A site nestled in the protective embrace of hills with a stream flowing in front of it was considered ideal. This was not just spiritual poetry. Such a location is, from a purely practical standpoint, naturally sheltered from erosive winds and has access to fresh water, while the hills themselves often indicate stable, geologically sound ground. Similarly, in India, the ancient architectural tradition of Vastu Shastra provided a detailed code for how to orient a building in harmony with cosmic and terrestrial forces. A temple or home was laid out as a precise mandala, its entrance typically facing east to welcome the life-giving sun, with specific functions assigned to each directional quadrant. This rigorous orientation ensured that the structure captured the sun's morning light and the prevailing breezes, creating a healthy, well-ventilated interior environment. The principles often dictated avoiding construction on land that was cracked, swampy, or at the base of a cliff, rules that conveniently steered builders away from landslide-prone areas and unstable soils. The timing of construction was also part of this sacred calculus. Groundbreaking and the laying of the foundation stone were often scheduled for astrologically propitious moments. While we might dismiss this as superstition, it imposed a necessary period of patience and observation. It forced the builders to study the land through the changing seasons, to understand its drainage patterns after a heavy rain and its exposure to the winter winds before a single stone was set. This deep, meditative engagement with a site led to intuitive choices that modern geology often confirms. A temple placed on a powerful ley line, according to tradition, might actually be situated upon a stable geological ridge or a subterranean water source whose presence subtly influences the local microclimate and even the stability of the ground. The feeling of peace and power that many people report at these ancient sites may stem from this perfect alignment, not with mystical energies, but with the fundamental, physical harmonies of the natural world. The spiritual belief and the practical necessity were two sides of the same coin. By seeking to build in a location that was spiritually charged, these geomancers were often, without knowing the modern scientific terms, selecting for optimal geotechnical stability, solar orientation, and protection from the elements. They understood that a building that was in tune with its place would be a building that endured. In our modern process of scraping a site flat and pouring a foundation, have we lost the art of listening to what the land itself is trying to tell us? A stone giant waits in a quarry, a multi-ton Moai statue on Easter Island. Its destination is a distant ceremonial platform, kilometers away across rugged, trackless terrain. There are no wheels here, no pulleys, and no draft animals strong enough to pull it. The 16th secret of ancient structural mechanics is perhaps the most visually stunning, the enigma of megalithic transportation, a feat that transforms a solitary block into a monument. How do you make a mountain walk? One of the most enduring theories involves a simple yet brilliant combination of log rollers and a lubricated sledge. Imagine a massive wooden sled beneath the statue, resting on a path of felled trees that act as rollers. As teams pull with ropes, the logs at the back are constantly carried to the front, creating a continuous, moving track. Experiments have shown that adding a slick layer of mud or sweet potato paste to the path dramatically reduces friction, allowing a surprisingly small group of people to pull a colossal weight. But another, even more ingenious idea has gained traction: the theory of walking the statues. In this method, ropes are tied around the head of the Moai. One team pulls forward while two other teams on either side use their ropes not to lift, but to rock the statue from side to side. With each coordinated rock and pull, the giant stone pivots on its curved base, effectively walking itself forward in a slow, deliberate shuffle. This counterbalanced rocking motion turns an immense dead weight into a dynamic, mobile object, a testament to the power of rhythm and teamwork over brute force. This mystery is not confined to a single island. The blue stones of Stonehenge, each weighing several tons, were transported from the Preseli Hills in Wales, a journey of over 250 kilometers. The sheer logistics are mind-boggling. Did Neolithic builders use a combination of sledges for land and rafts for river and coastal travel? The effort required suggests a society united by a powerful, shared purpose, capable of organizing labor and resources on a scale that rivals modern megaprojects. These were not random heaves, they were calculated exercises in applied physics. The ancient engineers understood leverage, friction, and the distribution of force. They knew how to use the weight of the stone itself to aid in its own movement, whether by rocking it or by guiding it down a prepared track. they transformed an impossible task into a sequence of manageable, coordinated actions, a slow dance of human and stone. The true monument was not just the statue finally erected on its platform, but the invisible achievement of the journey itself, a triumph of collective will and cleverness over the apparent limits of the physical world. What does it say about us that we so often underestimate the power of coordinated human ingenuity when faced with a seemingly immovable obstacle? A temple stands not by the strength of a single pillar, but by the silent agreement of many. This is the 17th secret of ancient structural mechanics, the principle of structural redundancy and fail-safe design. Ancient engineers understood that true resilience meant planning for the unexpected, for the slow decay of time or the sudden shock of disaster. They built in layers of backup, creating systems where the failure of one component would not spell the collapse of the whole. It was a conservative philosophy, one that favored long-term survival over elegant minimalism. Look at the forest of columns within an Egyptian hypostyle hall. The space is deliberately crowded, with many more stone pillars than would seem strictly necessary to hold up the roof. This was not an aesthetic choice alone, it was a calculated safety measure. If one column were to crack or settle, the load it carried would be immediately picked up by its neighbors. The structure had multiple parallel paths for the immense weight above, ensuring that a single point of failure could not bring everything down. This wisdom is etched into the very fabric of the pyramids at Giza. Their core is not a single monolithic pile of stone. Instead, it is often a layered construction, with an inner core of rougher, locally quarried blocks and an outer casing of finely fitted, higher-quality limestone. This dual skin system provided more than just a beautiful finish. It created a structural redundancy. The outer casing took the brunt of the weather and distributed loads efficiently, while the inner core provided a massive, stable backup. If the outer layer was damaged or stripped away over centuries, the inner core remained, still perfectly capable of supporting the monumental form. The same principle manifests in the double walls of mighty fortifications, like those found in ancient Mycenae or Hattusa. An attacker who managed to breach the outer wall would not find themselves in the city, but in a deadly corridor, trapped between that outer wall and a second, equally formidable inner wall. This was military genius, but it was also structural genius. The two walls could support each other, sharing the lateral pressure of the earth behind them and creating a far more stable defensive system than a single, thick barrier. This architectural insurance policy extended down to the smallest details. In stone lintels spanning doorways, builders would often use a single, massive block of stone, far stronger than the opening required. This over-engineering was a form of safety margin, a buffer against unforeseen stresses like ground settling or a minor tremor. They were not building to the bare minimum, but for a margin of safety that could span millennia. In our modern engineering, we often strive for efficiency, for structures that use the least material to achieve their purpose. But these ancient builders asked a different question. They asked, what is the cost of failure? Their answer was to build in backups, to weave multiple threads of support into the fabric of their creations. This redundancy was the ultimate expression of their commitment to the future, a promise whispered in stone that they intended to keep forever. The stones themselves told the builders when it was time for repair. This 18th secret moves beyond the moment of creation to the enduring act of care, revealing how astronomical cycles dictated the very schedule of preservation. Ancient societies did not wait for a roof to collapse. They maintained their structures with a rhythmic, proactive cadence, their calendars woven from the movements of the sun and stars serving as a meticulous maintenance log. This was not random upkeep, it was a form of celestial housekeeping, a long-term strategy embedded in their understanding of the world. The solar year, with its predictable seasons, provided the fundamental framework. In cultures from Egypt to Mesoamerica, the dry season was the time for work. To attempt major repairs during the annual inundation of the Nile or the heavy monsoon rains would have been futile. The new mortar washed away and the workforce immobilized. Instead, the clear, stable weather of the dry months offered the perfect window to inspect walls, reset loose stones, and apply protective coatings. The celestial calendar provided the precise starting signal. The heliacal rising of Sirius, which heralded the Nile flood for the Egyptians, also marked the end of the building season. Its appearance in the dawn sky was a command to secure tools, assess completed work, and prepare for the months of water. Then, when the floodwaters receded and the land was fertile and the skies clear again, the same celestial marker signaled the time to begin anew, to repair what the past year had worn down. This cyclical timing was a profound act of prevention. A small crack spotted and filled during the dry season would never have the chance to expand with winter ice or be eroded by summer rains. By aligning maintenance with optimal conditions, these cultures stopped decay in its tracks, addressing problems when they were small and manageable. This practice required a deep, generational foresight. It was a cultural ritual as much as a technical one. In many traditions, specific festivals or holy days tied to the solstices or equinoxes were not just for ceremony, they were also communal calls to action. A village might gather after the harvest moon to collectively re-mud the roofs of their dwellings, or a priestly class would inspect the temple foundations at a specific lunar phase. The cosmic event became a reminder to care for the earthly home. This rhythm of care transformed maintenance from a reactive chore into a sacred duty, a way of keeping the human world in sync with the cosmic order. The building was not a finished object, but a living entity that required seasonal nourishment. This long-term perspective, guided by the unwavering clockwork of the heavens, is what allowed so many of these structures to witness countless cycles of repair, each one layering resilience upon resilience until they achieved a lifespan that feels to us like forever. A master mason never wrote down his secrets, he sang them. Before blueprints and engineering manuals, the most resilient structures were designed and built using a different kind of technology, the human mind itself. This is the 19th secret, the power of oral tradition and encoded knowledge. Complex formulas for mortar mixes, precise geometric ratios, and step-by-step construction sequences were not stored on parchment, but memorized through rhythmic chants, epic poems, and ritual storytelling. This was a living, breathing library of engineering wisdom, passed directly from master to apprentice over generations. The knowledge was too vital to be trusted to something as fragile as paper. It had to be woven into the very culture, becoming as essential as a language or a prayer. To ensure its survival, this technical information was often encrypted within mythology. A creation myth might secretly encode the correct proportions for a stable arch. A song about a hero's journey could contain the precise recipe for a waterproof concrete, with each ingredient represented by a symbolic character or event. The apprentice learned the story and, in doing so, internalized the engineering principle without ever realizing he was studying structural mechanics. The ritual initiations of guilds and secret societies served a similar purpose. These ceremonies were not mere formalities. They were immersive, multi-sensory experiences designed to sear critical knowledge into the initiate's memory. The correct way to lift a stone, the secret sign for a specific type of timber, the chant to be recited while mixing mortar, these became unforgettable through the power of ritual and rite. This system created a chain of custody for knowledge that was incredibly durable. we see its echoes in traditions that have survived for centuries. In parts of West Africa, for instance, families of masons have preserved complex mud brick building techniques through oral history alone, maintaining architectural styles for hundreds of years after the original kingdoms that spawned them had faded into history. The story was the instruction manual, and as long as the story was told, the knowledge lived. This method placed a supreme value on accuracy and repetition. A single misremembered word in a chant could mean a flawed building mix leading to a collapse. The pressure to recall everything perfectly ensured a discipline and focus that a written reference might have diluted. The master held the entire architectural genome in his head, and his most important duty was to pass it on, unchanged, to the next worthy mind. This raises a haunting thought. In our digital age, where we store everything in clouds and on hard drives, have we lost the art of encoding essential wisdom into our very cultural DNA, creating a knowledge that can outlast any empire and survive any catastrophe? Sunlight is a substance you can build with. High above in the Pantheon's dome, the oculus is a single open eye to the sky, and the beam of light it emits is not random. It is a precisely calibrated instrument. As the sun arcs across the heavens, this solid pillar of illumination travels across the vast marble floor, marking the hours like the hand of a cosmic clock. On the spring equinox, it strikes a specific point near the entrance. By the summer solstice, it illuminates the very center of the great bronze doors. This is the 20th secret, the ancient art of engineering with light and shadow. Architects were not just designing walls and roofs, they were sculpting illumination itself, using it to define space, guide ritual, and even manipulate the physical environment. Apertures were not just windows, they were tools. In the deep, windowless sanctuaries of Egyptian temples, light was rationed and directed with dramatic intent. A single high slit might be positioned so the rising sun on a pharaoh's birthday would strike the statue of a god, seemingly bringing it to life. The beam was a divine visitor, its arrival timed by the architecture. This required an astonishing understanding of solar geometry, of how light would behave not just on one day, but throughout the entire yearly cycle. Reflective surfaces amplified this effect. Polished marble floors like the one in the Pantheon or gold leaf mosaics in Byzantine churches would catch and scatter the light, bathing the interior in a diffuse, ethereal glow. The building itself became a source of illumination, its materials chosen for their ability to conduct and transform light. This manipulation served a deeply practical purpose as well. The strategic placement of windows and vents could create a passive cooling system. In traditional Middle Eastern architecture, wind catchers would capture breezes, but they were often paired with small, high windows on the opposite side of a building. This created a cross-draft, pulling hot air up and out while cooler air flowed in at floor level. The play of light and air were part of the same environmental design. Similarly, the deep-set windows of medieval castles or the shaded porticos of Greek stoas were designed to block the high, hot summer sun while admitting the low, warm light of winter. The structure itself adapted to the seasons through its interaction with light, reducing thermal stress and maintaining a more stable interior climate without any mechanical aid. This choreography of light was a fundamental layer of the architectural composition. It was the final, brilliant stroke that animated the geometry, that made the space feel alive and connected to the cosmos. The building was not a static object, but a dynamic participant in the dance of day and night, summer and winter. It makes you wonder, in our electrically lit world, have we lost the ability to design with this profound, natural luminosity, to let the sun itself write the story of our spaces? A bridge in the jungles of India is not built but grown. For centuries, the War-Kossis people have guided the pliable roots of the Ficus elastica tree across rivers, training them over frameworks to form living, breathing spans. These are not structures imposed upon the landscape, but ones that emerge from it, becoming stronger with every passing year. This is the 21st secret, the brilliant integration of biological life into structural mechanics, where architecture becomes a collaborative, evolving partner with nature itself. Ancient builders across the globe understood that the most resilient material was often a living one. They saw in the tenacious grip of a vine a natural binding cord, one that would tighten as it dried and flex with the wind. They recognized that a young tree, deliberately planted as a corner post, would eventually transform into a deep-rooted, unshakable pillar, its trunk thickening to shoulder ever greater loads. This was not a primitive substitute for stone or wood, but a sophisticated choice. A living root bridge can withstand monsoon floods that would sweep away any stone construction, its organic fibers yielding to the current rather than fracturing against it. As the roots grow, they naturally fuse together, weaving a network that distributes stress and even self-repairs minor damage. The structure is in a constant, slow-motion dance of adaptation and reinforcement. We see echoes of this philosophy in other traditions. In parts of Southeast Asia, builders would use rattan, a robust climbing palm, to lash together the frames of homes and bridges. This natural cordage possessed a flexibility that nails or rigid joints lacked, allowing the entire structure to sway safely during storms or tremors. In some Native American cultures, the supple branches of young saplings were bent and woven into durable domed frameworks for dwellings, creating a shell that was both lightweight and incredibly resilient. This biointegration represents a fundamental shift in perspective. It asks us to see a building not as a finished, static object, but as a process. The architect becomes a gardener, the builder a cultivator. The goal is not to defeat time with a monolith, but to invite time in as a co-builder. The structure gains a life of its own, its strength increasing organically rather than diminishing through decay. This ancient wisdom stands in stark contrast to our modern methods, where we typically seek to separate the biological from the structural, to eliminate the unpredictable variable of life. We pour concrete and treat wood to repel the very organisms that these builders invited to join the project. What profound lessons in sustainability and resilience might we learn if we began to see our buildings not as separate from the natural world, but as an extension of its living, breathing systems? The weight of a single obelisk was measured not just in stone, but in silver and grain. Ancient megaprojects were profound economic engines, massive undertakings that could bankrupt a kingdom or fuel its rise to greatness. The 22nd secret reveals the complex financial calculus behind these timeless structures, a system that balanced immediate cost against an eternal legacy. Funding such ventures required immense capital, drawn from the very fabric of society. Pharaohs financed pyramids through a centralized economy of taxation on grain, livestock, and labor. Roman emperors poured the spoils of conquered nations into their aqueducts and forums. In the theocratic cities of Mesoamerica, temple construction was funded by religious tribute, a sacred duty that channeled community wealth into monumental centers. This was not merely spending, it was a strategic investment in power. A colossal pyramid was a statement of divine authority, its construction binding the populace to the ruler's will through a shared, generations-long endeavor. It consolidated power by demonstrating control over resources and human destiny itself. But these projects also functioned as the largest public works programs in history. During the annual Nile flood, when farming was impossible, the Egyptian state employed thousands of skilled laborers and artisans at the Giza Plateau. This provided stable wages and food, preventing social unrest and circulating wealth back into the economy. The workforce was not a nameless mob of slaves, but a stratified society of paid specialists, from quarrymen and sailors to carpenters and cooks, all supported by a vast logistical network. The procurement of materials spun a web of commerce that stretched across continents. The cedar logs for the roof of Solomon's temple in Jerusalem were felled in Lebanon and shipped down the coast. The distinctive blue stones of Stonehenge were transported from Welsh quarries over 200 miles away. This long-distance trade was not just about moving rock, it was a catalyst for diplomacy, cultural exchange, and technological transfer. A trade route established for limestone could later carry ideas, metalworking techniques, and artistic styles. The economic impact rippled outward for centuries. A Roman aqueduct did not just supply water, it enabled urban growth, public baths, and sanitation, boosting public health and commerce. The roads built to transport stone for a temple later served merchants and armies, binding a kingdom together with arteries of trade and communication. The initial cost was staggering, but the return was a civilized infrastructure that endured for millennia. The ancient economic model asked a question we rarely consider today. What is the true value of a building that will still be serving a society 1,000 years from now? Their calculus measured cost not in annual budgets, but in the unbroken lineage of a civilization. A steady drumbeat echoes across the Giza Plateau, its rhythm matching the heartbeat of the workers. This was more than music, it was a vital tool of engineering. The 23rd secret of ancient structural mechanics is the use of sound and rhythm to orchestrate the superhuman task of moving mountains. When a team of hundreds had to pull a rope in perfect unison to lift a multi-ton obelisk, a single voice calling the cadence was not enough. The sound needed to be loud, pervasive, and impossible to ignore. A lead chanter would sing out a call, and the workers would respond with a collective heave on the downbeat, their combined effort channeled into a single, synchronized pulse of force. This auditory coordination was a matter of both efficiency and safety. A mistimed pull could snap a hemp rope, sending a stone crashing down or whipping the broken cord back with lethal force. The rhythm ensured every person acted as one muscle in a giant body, minimizing wasted energy and preventing catastrophic accidents. The rhythm also transformed the nature of the work itself. The monotonous, back-breaking labor of dragging a sledge for miles could become a shared, almost trance-like experience when set to a powerful, repetitive chant. It raised morale, forged a sense of common purpose, and turned an impossible chore into a collective ritual. This sonic layer of construction suggests a belief that the harmony of the process could be transferred into the stone itself. Just as a sacred hymn was thought to carry power, the rhythmic songs used to raise a temple may have been intended to imbue its walls with that same ordered resonance. The builders were not just stacking rocks to a beat, they were using sound to weave stability and spiritual integrity into the very fabric of their creation. The line between the practical and the sacred blurred completely. The drum that kept time for the rope pullers was the same instrument played in ceremonies within the finished temple. The chant that coordinated a lift was a variation of a prayer. In this worldview, a building created with musical harmony would itself be harmonious, its stones holding the memory of the rhythm that set them in place. This reveals a culture where art and engineering were not separate disciplines, but inseparable partners in the act of creation. The architect was a composer, the construction site was his orchestra, and the finished structure was a symphony written in stone. Every sacred site tells a story about the center of the world. This is the 24th secret, the archetype of the cosmic center, a design principle that wove the universe itself into the very floor plan of a temple or a city. Ancient architects did not just build structures, they created symbolic microcosms, miniature models of an ordered cosmos. At the heart of this concept lies the axis mundi, a spiritual axis believed to connect the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. This symbolic center was not merely a philosophical idea, it was a powerful organizational tool that produced layouts of profound structural stability. The mandala plans of Hindu and Buddhist temples are a perfect illustration. These intricate geometric diagrams represent the universe in perfect balance. When translated into architecture, the mandala dictates a symmetrical, concentric layout with a central shrine, the garbhagriha or womb chamber, representing the axis of the world. This radial symmetry is not just spiritually potent, it is mechanically brilliant. The forces of the structure are distributed evenly in all directions from the central point, creating a natural equilibrium that resists tipping or uneven settlement. The weight of a towering shikara or spire is channeled down through this symmetrical core, its load shared by the surrounding walls and pillars in a harmonious, circular flow of energy. The same principle resonates in the great stone circles of Northern Europe. While their celestial alignments are famous, their circular form itself is a structural statement. A circle has no weak side, no corner for the wind to catch and exploit. The forces of nature press against it uniformly, and the community gathered within is united around a shared central space. This circular archetype creates a container of immense stability, a form that naturally dissipates stress and stands firm against the chaotic push of the elements. This concept of a layered hierarchy extended to entire cities. Many ancient capitals were conceived as cosmic diagrams, with the king's palace or the main temple positioned at the exact center, representing the axis mundi. From this sacred nucleus, the city would radiate outward in concentric rings of walls, canals, and districts, mirroring the perceived order of the cosmos. This radial plan was more than a symbol of power. It was a highly efficient system for defense and infrastructure. Forces could be mobilized along the radiating avenues to any point on the perimeter, and the symmetrical layout created a clear, logical flow for water and people. By building a city that mirrored the universe, they were invoking a divine order they believed would ensure its permanence. The stability was seen as a direct result of the cosmic harmony. A building or a city that was a perfect model of the world would, by its very nature, be as enduring as the world itself. This fusion of symbol and structure created a powerful feedback loop, where the spiritual meaning inspired a physical form that was inherently resilient, and that physical resilience, in turn, seemed to validate the spiritual belief. In our modern cities of grids and sprawl, have we lost the power of a shared center, that symbolic heart that once gave a place both its meaning and its enduring strength? Fire can burn a library to ash, but it cannot erase the shape of a stone. The 25th secret is the preservation of knowledge through cataclysm. When empires fractured and cities fell into silence, when the great library of Alexandria was lost to flames, the most vital architectural wisdom did not disappear. It survived not on fragile papyrus, but through a resilient, decentralized network of human memory and enduring practice. The key was that this knowledge was not held in one single vault. It was dispersed like seeds across a wide field. When invasion or collapse struck one region, the master builders, the masons, and the engineers would often migrate. They carried their skills with them as their most valuable possession, finding new patrons in foreign lands. A Roman architect might find work in the rising Byzantine East, his understanding of concrete and arches subtly influencing new church designs. A Mesopotamian brickmaker's techniques could travel along trade routes, slowly filtering into new building traditions. This migration of skilled artisans created a slow, persistent cross-pollination of ideas, ensuring that no single disaster could wipe the slate completely clean. The principles themselves were also encoded in the most durable textbook of all, the Standing Monuments. A surviving Roman aqueduct was not just a source of water, it was a permanent lecture in hydraulic engineering. A Gothic cathedral that had weathered centuries was a masterclass in load distribution and geometric proportion, standing there for anyone with the eyes to learn from it. These structures served as a physical archive, a library written in stone and mortar that no flame could touch. Later builders, even if they had lost the original formulas, could reverse engineer the wisdom by simply observing what had worked, what had lasted. In some cases, this preservation was deliberate and secretive. Guilds of masons and esoteric societies became the custodians of advanced knowledge, guarding it through oral initiation rites and complex symbolism. During times of persecution or upheaval, these closed groups acted as insulated vessels, carrying the flame of technical understanding through the darkest periods. They protected the recipes for extraordinary mortar, the precise ratios for stable domes, and the geometric secrets of the master masons, passing them down from one worthy initiate to the next. This is why we see a remarkable continuity of certain techniques across fallen empires. The true arch, for instance, did not have to be reinvented from scratch after Rome's decline. Its principle survived, was adapted, and was refined in different forms across the medieval world. The core insight that a structure must dance with an earthquake, not fight it, persisted in separate traditions from Japan to Peru. This was not a coincidence. It was the result of a robust, decentralized system of preservation that relied on human movement, physical monuments, and secret guardianship. The knowledge proved to be as resilient as the buildings it created. It ensured that even in the dark ages of history, a thread of architectural wisdom remained unbroken, waiting for the moment it would be needed again to raise new stone giants towards the sky. What does this tell us about the nature of truly vital knowledge? It suggests that the most enduring ideas are not those locked away in a single repository, but those that are lived, practiced, and built into the world itself. An electron microscope reveals a hidden world within a 2,000-year-old sample of Roman concrete. What it shows are tiny, interlocking crystals of a rare mineral called aluminous tobamorite. These crystals are not a relic of the original mix, but a product of a slow-burning chemical reaction that continues for centuries, actively filling micro-cracks and strengthening the material from within. This is the moment of modern validation, where advanced science confirms the genius of ancient recipes. We are now using the most sophisticated tools at our disposal, from three-dimensional laser scanning to computer simulations, to finally understand how these structures have defied time. Archaeologists and engineers are collaborating in a new kind of treasure hunt, where the prize is not gold but knowledge. They use ground-penetrating radar to map the foundations of megalithic sites without lifting a single stone, revealing cleverly designed drainage systems and load-bearing earthworks that were invisible for millennia. Finite element analysis, a computer modeling technique, allows them to simulate earthquakes and wind forces on a digital model of the Pantheon or a Maya pyramid. The results are often astonishing, showing how the very features we once considered merely decorative, like the subtle intosses of a column, are in fact masterstrokes of stress distribution. This research is far from a purely academic exercise. It is directly inspiring a new wave of sustainable architecture. Material scientists, for instance, are actively trying to reverse engineer Roman concrete. They are experimenting with volcanic ash and seawater to create modern composites that are more durable and have a far lower carbon footprint than traditional Portland cement. The ancient principle of designing buildings to move with seismic forces rather than resist them has been validated and refined into the base isolation systems that protect skyscrapers and hospitals in earthquake-prone regions today. We are learning that the intuitive grasp these builders had of their materials and environment holds profound lessons for our own future. The dialogue between the past and present is revealing a humbling truth. Our ancestors did not just build strong things, they understood strength in a deeper, more holistic way. They saw the integrity of a structure as a product of its harmony with the natural world, from the chemical potential of its mortar to the path of the sun and the flow of the wind. We are only now developing the instruments to measure what they knew in their bones. This turns historical mystery into a living wellspring of innovation, suggesting that the most advanced solutions for a sustainable future might be waiting for us patiently in the stones of the past. This journey through time reveals a single, unifying principle: that the ancient world's greatest engineers were not conquerors of nature, but its most attentive students. From the earthquake-dancing stones of Machu Picchu to the molecular self-repair of Roman concrete, their legacy is a masterclass in resilience. They did not see a canyon as an obstacle, but as an opportunity for a gravity-fed aqueduct. They did not fight an earthquake, but designed a structure that could sway in rhythm with it. This was not primitive technology. It was a sophisticated philosophy of harmony, where every material, every angle, and every placement was a conscious collaboration with the forces of the earth. The secrets we have uncovered are far more than archaeological trivia. They are a vital blueprint for our own future. In an era defined by climate change and resource scarcity, these ancient strategies for sustainability speak directly to our most pressing challenges. They teach us that true durability comes from working with the environment, not against it. It comes from using local, natural materials to their fullest potential and designing structures that are adaptable, not just strong. The Roman recipe for concrete that grows stronger in seawater could revolutionize our coastal infrastructure. The Inca understanding of load distribution could inspire more efficient and durable building designs. The passive cooling of Persian windcatchers offers a blueprint for reducing our massive energy consumption. This is not about nostalgia for a lost past. It is about unlocking a toolkit for a viable future. The stones have been speaking for millennia, holding answers to questions we are only now learning to ask. So let this be an invitation for your own exploration. Look at the ancient world not as a graveyard of dead civilizations, but as a living library of brilliant ideas. Which of these mysteries captures your imagination the most? Is it the celestial clocks of Stonehenge, the acoustic magic of the hypogeum, or the lost tools that carved granite like butter? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you are eager to continue this journey into the past to illuminate our future, be sure to subscribe for